Yes.
Go ahead. So we now have a title and topic for the retreat at the end of July. At that point, I would have just come back from Peru. I will be in Peru starting from June 17, and we'll be there until July 14. And then I will get back to Asheville for 10 days or so, something like that. 10, 15 days, and then I will come to Little Rock.
That's a nice time in between travel.
Yes. And then I get back from Little Rock, and I will have 2 weeks. Then I have to be in Mexico. Most of September, I will be in Asheville. And then October, I may have to go back to Peru. So we see. So, anyway, last week when we met, I think we we went all the way to the end of that chapter on patience.
Yeah.
So I emphasized last week, when we are encountering learning, even those of us who have been involved many years, it's worth reminding ourselves that not only are we learning a new body of materials, a new set of information, so to say, we are also needing to adjust, how we learn, our habits, and our baggage, to kind of keep track of our baggage. Or we could say we should be aware of how much that our framework determines, what we get out of written texts. Sometimes, we naively assume, the book is the same book, and no matter who reads it, the intent of the author would come across immediately, and the same for everyone. That's not true. So not only do we need to be alert and aware of, which is the easy one, which is like, oh, this material, it's really kind of new, or I'm unfamiliar with it. And in fact, I would say, if you first read it and then you're like, oh, this is very familiar, I also say, be cautious. Because you might be kind of reducing what that other text is saying to already your firmly and strongly held beliefs about, what is true and what is right. Now, it could be that these two are actually aligned, but sometimes it is not. Which then means, our way of reading, our way of hearing these teachings have greatly influenced how, what is it that we heard? What is it that we got? Many years ago, I think Tricycle, this Buddhist magazine, featured an article written by a Zen Buddhist teacher who also has an academic position at McMaster University in Canada. I think McMaster is kind of like Canada's Harvard. And so he was actually also like a second or third generation Japanese, trained as a Zen monk, but also a scholar in the Western academic tradition of scholar of Buddhist studies. And so very thoughtfully, he wrote about this. He used this as an anecdote to, call attention to what I'm talking about. He said that he attended a meditation retreat offered by a famous Taiwanese Buddhist monk, this Venerable Shengyan, who has passed on already. Venerable Shengyan is a Zen Chan master in the Chinese Taiwanese tradition. So this scholar monk attended this like a week-long retreat, week-long Zen intensive session, where he said that in this gathering, unlike many of the retreats in the US, which is almost predominantly attended by Caucasian, white participants. In this particular retreat, it was almost equally divided between Asian Americans and Caucasian Americans. Then at the end of the week-long retreat, the Zen master invited everyone to share whatever words that they want to share. So various people said various things, but the two persons that talked about their experience was what this scholar monk highlighted in this article. He said maybe it wasn't clear, this contrast between these two people to many of the people who attended, but to him, it was a very contrasting picture. And so he said one person got up, this Asian American woman. She got up and she talked about how throughout this week-long retreat, a theme that came back for her again and again was how grateful she was feeling towards all the people in her life, particularly her parents, who have been so important to her in her life in so many ways, material-wise, education-wise, and spiritual-wise. And so she teared up, talking about that, and also talking about her feelings of not having sufficiently expressed her gratitude to all these people in her lives that have contributed to who she is and how she has grown and developed. In contrast, another person got up and spoke, a Caucasian woman, and she spoke to how this week really empowered her, so that she's no longer feeling inadequate, invisible, not wanting the validation so much from other people, seeing the pointlessness of that and the impossibility of that. And she felt that this retreat really helped her, like find her true self as an individual. So this scholar monk wrote in this article, he said, said the same meditation, listened to the same teachings, ate the same food, stayed in the same conditions. But depending on where these two people came from, they found different things. Not to say one is more right than the other, but it just really shows, how much of what we carry into the picture, into the context, into the text, determines so much of what we will hear, we will receive from either the teacher or the text. Of the two, maybe the teacher, if there's follow-up, then the teacher can, if necessary, like I said, I'm not suggesting these two contrasting picture, the Asian woman was more correct and the Caucasian woman was less, or vice versa. But if there is a living teacher, if the teacher is attuned to, if the teacher hears those two, and feels like some correction is needed, he may say something, she may point out something. But when it comes to texts, texts frequently don't talk back. Some texts do talk back if you know how to listen, you know. Some texts do talk back, you know, but for the most part, texts don't talk back. So then we have to be even more kind of aware of, right? How much of our background, our framework is what we need to watch out for. Yeah. So anyway, so last week therefore I talked about how some of the language that you're going to find, you know, in this text may seem a little stark, you know. Actually, when we get to the chapter on meditative concentration, especially in that chapter, Shantideva uses some very strong words about the yucky nature of this body, and also seemingly kind of like misogynistic language. So when we get there, you know, we have to be extra careful and not end up learning the wrong lessons, you know. I'm not here to apologize for Shantideva. I'm not here to defend Shantideva. In fact, he doesn't need that. I'm also not here to improve Shantideva. That's, you know, not my job. I'm also not here to make Shantideva more palatable to you. But I can say that whatever you're going to hear me say about Shantideva, I speak it from a position of feeling like this is what Shantideva intended. So how do we cut through some of the culturally bound language and expression and even emphasis, culturally, historically bound circumstance? So I seek to offer you a way of hearing Shantideva, hopefully in the way that he intended us to hear what he has to say, what he has to teach. So now the chapter on diligence. Sometimes this title can also be translated as joyful effort, or at least teachers have explained it in this way. Joyful effort, not only joyful effort, but joyful, skillful effort. Yeah? You cannot call this effort if the effort is to go take advantage of other people, rob the bank, get rich, you know. Those don't qualify. This chapter, when it talks about diligence, is talking about it is something joyful, and it's talking about being inspired with a joyful energy, that you become more. How do you become more and more inspired to overcome the mental defilements, to overcome the afflictive emotions? At the core, you know, all Buddhist teachings are pointing in that direction. It's about how do we clear mental defilements? How do we clear afflictive emotions? To whatever degree clearing of mental defilements and afflictive emotions translate to the kind of changes that we want to see in the world, then that is the change outside in the world that could occur. But I think we are kidding ourselves, we're fooling ourselves if we think that, you know, simply engaging in Buddhist practice is going to solve all the problems in the world that is happening. The problems in the world that is happening takes actually a lot of very expertise, knowledge, as well as good heart. Where the Buddhist teachings can offer is the good heart part. So don't misunderstand, you know, when you hear me explaining this, you know, it sounds like, oh, I'm not interested in kind of like real world problems. No, it's not that I'm not interested, but I have to find my own way of how to address real world problems to a degree that can I feel is meaningful to me, that I can actually do something about. But as for the Buddha's teachings, is primarily directed at the mental defilements, the afflictive emotions. Now, of course, even that is based on a basic understanding that all the problems in the world arises from when the heart is clouded, when the heart is taken over by these afflictive emotions, mental defilements. And so perhaps from a position of humility, then I would say simply Buddhist teachings is inadequate, really, to effectively make changes in the outside world. But I can also say that if you cultivate the good heart, good also includes clear seeing. That's part of being good, clear seeing. If you cultivate the good heart according to these teachings, then you have what is most important in trying to make this world a better place. But as for the actual know-how, the ins and the outs, it takes a lot more learning about all the different levels of those problems that are out there. Simply you knowing Buddhist teachings or even practicing Buddhist teachings will not solve that. I mean, look, Tibetans lost their country. It got invaded by the communist Chinese. Yes, of course, you could say, oh, this is, this is a oppressive force that have occupied Tibet, but everything is interdependent. Tibetans wouldn't have lost their country if there weren't also contributing conditions. The cause may be an invading force, but the contributing conditions within Tibet, which goes to show, they have so much of Buddha Dharma, but it doesn't automatically translate to solving what we may call real world problems. But as for preparing the gumption that is needed, the heart, the good heart that is needed, then yes, Buddha Dharma has powerful practices and understandings that can help. And Shantideva is one of the best representatives of this tradition in speaking of how to safeguard the heart, transform the heart. So diligence is necessary, and here diligence, as I say, is this joyful effort, this joyful energy that uplifts us, to act in the direction of virtue, in the direction of benefiting self and others. If you look at the very last stanza of this chapter, stanza 76, just as flaxen threads waft to and fro, impelled by every breath of wind, so all I do will be achieved, controlled by movements of a joyful heart. That is what diligence is. Movements of a joyful heart. The diligence comes from this joyful heart. So it's an uplifting energy, is what diligence here is. Not the, not the sort of parents telling teenagers, you got to be diligent, you got to work harder, you got to work harder, you got to work harder, That's not the diligence in chapter 7. So verse 1 in chapter 7, thus with patience I will strive with diligence. So patience was addressed in the last chapter. So patience, another way of kind of, a very pithy, short, brief, direct way of saying what is patience. Patience is the ability to accept what is. Accept doesn't mean surrendering to whatever the present condition. It doesn't mean that. Accept means see it for what it is. And when you see it for what it is, it's either a happiness producing thing or a suffering producing thing. That's one aspect. Second aspect, no matter it's a happiness producing thing, phenomena, person, situation, or a suffering producing one, they are both temporary and very much changeable. So that's the accepting of what is. Inability to accept what is therefore the opposite of that patience that we're talking about. Unwillingness to accept what is, not wanting to see what is, and not wanting to accept what is the opposite of that patience. So thus with patience, I will now strive with diligence. For in such diligence, enlightenment is found. The state of Buddha can be found there. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without diligence. Neither is there the fuel that you will need for this journey if there is no joyful effort, if there is no diligence. And this, if no wind blows, then nothing stirs. So, this is speaking to how most of us tend not want to be stirred at all. Or for that matter, shaken, neither stirred nor shaken. We don't like that. But here, Shantideva says, nothing stirs here means, we will be slumbering away to no end in this dreamlike existence and not even know or understand we're in a dreamlike existence. So something needs to stir. And for something to stir then, winds. And winds are often the metaphor of, even in English, the winds of change. So when change happens, when impermanence happens, we need to see that as an opportunity for something to stir. And when something stirs, if we know how to relate to the something that stirs, then it can be recruited to actually help us clear these mental defilements. The ultimate mental defilement is the ignorance as it pertains to the status of self. Right down, Buddha says, primarily we suffer because that which is not self, we take to be self. That which cannot be satisfactory, we take to be like, the key to my happiness. And that which is unreliable, meaning impermanent, we relate to them, we behave as if it is assuredly permanent. So these three things, sometimes called the three characteristics of our current existence. That which is not self, we take to be self. That which is ultimately unsatisfactory, unable to give us the happiness we want, we blindly believe, we stubbornly believe is where the happiness we're looking for. And that which is not permanent and therefore unreliable, we build our sandcastles out of them. Of course, when truth sets in, and it will set in, very quickly, then we suffer. We experience suffering instead of experiencing happiness. So when the winds of change blow, then something stirs. And when something stirs, right, then opportunity to gain fuel, merit, comes up. But that can only come up with, we have this diligence. Diligence means joy in virtuous ways. And so here he defines the diligence that we're talking about here is Tsundru in Tibetan, which the footnote says renders the Sanskrit virya. While expressing a sense of strong endeavor, the Tibetan, according to Shantideva, suggests a sense of joy and enthusiasm, features that are brought out powerfully in the course of the present chapter. The Sanskrit term carries with it, I'm just reading the footnote now, the Sanskrit term carries with it a sense of indomitable strength and courage, and is connected with our words such as viro, virago, as well as virtue. The general sense is one of great courage and perseverance, fearlessness in the face of adversity. That's what we're talking about. That's what Shantideva is talking about when he talks about diligence. Its contraries have been defined as laziness, like the ordinary laziness that you and I know about. I would rather lounge around. I would rather just sit in front of a TV. I don't feel like showering. I won't feel like combing my hair. And also, not only that is the opposite of diligence, also an inclination for unwholesomeness, meaning an inclination towards those causes that create suffering. That is also contrary to this diligence. And then defeatism and self-contempt. This is the deepest level of mental defilement that will stand in the way for joyful effort to develop. It's this feeling like I'm not good enough. I don't like myself. And so these three, it's said that diligence is the antidote. Diligence is the opposite of these three types of defilements. A taste for idle pleasure and a craving for repose and sleep. No qualms about the sorrows of samsara. Laziness indeed is born from these. We become, so attached to repose and sleep. Then snared by the trapper of defiled emotion, mental defilements, enmeshed and taken in the toils of birth, enmeshed and taken in the toils of birth, again you have strayed into the maw of death. What is it? Have you still not understood? Don't you see how one by one death has come for all your kind, and yet you slumber on so soundly, like a buffalo beside its butcher? All the paths of light are blocked. The Lord of Death now has just you in his sight. How can you take such pleasure in your food? And how can you delight to rest and sleep? That's the problem with the foul emotions, with these mental defilements. They snare us into the jaws of death. And death is not just talking about the, the big death. We have many, many, many deaths on our way to the big death. And yet, he says, yet we don't seem to understand. Yet it seems like we keep forgetting. Don't you see how one by one death has come for all your kind, and yet you slumber on so soundly, like a buffalo beside its butcher? All the paths of flight are blocked, no escape. The Lord of Death now has you in his sights. How can you take such pleasure in food, and how can you delight to sleep and rest? And so there's this sense of urgency. We often think, when when people die or death, is things that only happen to other people, not to me. So part of one of the the main kind of like organizing context of people I teach is this group called Trigung Dhammakirti, and we have a website. On our website, we have a service where it's a dedication wall, so people can submit names. Often these are names of friends or family, or sometimes it's just people read in the news of a tragic death or something like that, and they want to help the people who have died. So then they send us a picture of that person, the name of that person, when they died, and we will keep on the dedication wall for 49 days. And then every evening, some of our members do this practice that is said to benefit those that are in between two lifetimes in the intermediate state in the bardo. So when you go look at that list of names, it's a sampling of names. Immediately you will see it is not true at all that only older people die. Totally not true. This is just a random sampling of names. It's totally not true that only older people die. If you want to divide them into young, teenager, then grown up, middle age, then old age, right? Every single group of these are equally represented. Death will swoop on you so swiftly. Gather merit till that moment comes. Gather bright fuel, clean fuel, as we say today. Gather clean fuel so that you can keep kind of flying up to the heights, so to say, with this clean fuel, with this merit. So gather bright karma, liberating karma. Gather this karma, bright karma, till the moment when death takes us. For even if you then throw off your indolence, what will you do when there is no more time? So some people think, oh, I'll do it, later. But then later, death is already knocking on your door. And when death is already knocking on your door, there's not much you can do to turn it away, to turn it around. And then in those moments, these thoughts will come. This I have not done, and this I'm only starting, and this I'm only halfway through. Milarepa says, the affairs of the world, what the world wants from you is unending. There's no end to it. People I meet here in Nashville, a lot of them are retirees. But if they're honest about it, they're way busier now than before. Yeah, of course, the system has produced very effective products, into brainwashing us into being busy, 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 busy. So the only difference between pre-retirement and retirement is organized busyness and disorganized busyness. I got to do this, I got to do that, got to do this, got to do that. When before you're retired, people kind of leave you alone to some degree, right? Like certain parts of the day, certain parts of the week, they're like, oh no. But then once you're retired, they're like, any time of the day. And most of us don't know how to say no. Also terrified to say no. Because we have habituated being busy, 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 busy. Buzzing around like a bee. So this I have not done, and this I'm only starting, and this I'm only halfway through. Then in the sudden coming of the Lord of Death, and oh, the thought, alas, I'm finished. No more time. So don't wait until then. Because then, if you wait until then, you look upon the faces of your hopeless friends, their tear-stained cheeks, their red and swollen eyes, for such will be the depths of their distress, and then you'll see the heralds of the deadly Lord. Then death comes. The memory of former sins will torture you. The memory of unskillful actions, harmful actions that you have done in the past will torture you. The screams and din of hell break on your ears. With every terror you will foul yourself. What will you do in such delirium? If like a living fish that twists and writhes, you are so terrified while still alive, what need to speak of pain unbearable in hells created by past evil deeds? So nobody created these hells that the Buddha talked about. They're simply the ripening of our past actions. And nobody designed this so that the world will be a more just place, so that people who have done wrong should be punished for the wrong they have done, and people who have done good should be rewarded for the good that they have done. That's not how the Buddha understands and these places called heavens and hells. He says, as you habituate your mind in a certain set of mental, emotional states, and through that you manifest the world that you live in. So in that sense, so-called heaven and so-called hell in the Buddhist context, and they were not designed by anyone to reward or to punish. Rather, they're simply the unfolding the manifestation of the karma that we have created. If like a living fish that twists and writhes, you are so terrified while still alive, what need to speak of pain unbearable in hells created by past evil deeds? How can you remain at ease like this when you have done the deeds that lead to contact on your tender baby flesh of boiling liquids in the hell of extreme heat? So testy and thin-skinned, you want results without endeavor. It's like nobody wants suffering, But then lack of suffering is not going to happen just like that. Right? We cannot want results without endeavor. Many are the troubles now in store for you. Though in the grip of death, you are behaving like a god. Right? Though in the grip of death, which is now all of us are in the grip of death. But then we behave like we are immortals. We behave like we are gods. Again, death only happens to other people. Though in the grip of death you are behaving like a god, and suffering, alas, will beat you down. So take advantage of this human boat, free yourself from suffering's mighty stream. This vessel will later be very hard to find. The time that you have now, you fool, is not for sleep. So again, you don't need to turn this into literally an attack on sleep. Especially these days, most of us have a hard time to start with getting decent sleep. This is a different context, This is speaking to a context, to a group where, sleep is very easy. They don't have the kind of constantly going on, I got to achieve this, I got to achieve this, I got to achieve this, I want this, I want that, Shantideva is in the 8th century, is talking to these monks who live their life in the monastery. So there, in some ways, the laziness of wanting to sleep was probably very common. And here, we have trouble sleeping. So he's not advocating, you not sleeping. Here, even you can read it in more metaphorically. It's like, don't walk around like you're in a dream state, like a zombie. And the time that you have now, you fool, is not for sleep. Don't walk around. Don't live our lives with eyes closed. You turn your back upon the sacred doctrine, the Dharma, supreme joy and boundless source of bliss. Why delight in mere excitement in distractions that will cause you misery? And so we get excited by all this bling bling that is out there. And we turn our backs on those teachings that tell us directly what is it that we're experiencing? What is the true identity of these things, right? But 16, do not be downcast. Do not be discouraged. Yes, there's all these kind of terrifying uncertainty of death. But do not be downcast, but marshal all your powers. Make an effort. Be the master of yourself. Practice the equality of self and other. Practice the exchange of self and other. So this is the philosophical grounds for a meditative practices called Donglen. So to take other people's suffering and to give them your happiness. So first, how can you do that? You can do that by cultivating a deeper and deeper appreciation of how self and other are basically no different. Right now, instinctively, self we cherish stronger than other. I was just noticing the other day, a student sent me a photo to explain why they were not in class. Every Wednesday night we have a practice group in the class, and they sent a picture of 2 big trees falling into some power lines. And this is like in Leon, in Mexico, and they said no power. When I first looked at the photo, it looked as if this was like outside of their house. But then later, he said, oh no, it's not. It's, the next road over. But as a result, we don't have power in the area. And then I said, oh, phew, luckily. Then in the next moment, I caught myself and I said, you see how, right? Like as simple as something like this happens and you're like, oh, good thing it's not me. And then by extension, oh, good thing it's not my friends. Well, what about those other poor souls, right? It's not even that we are such bad people. It's not even that we are such, self-absorbed people, but it's kind of written into our response, you know. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm so thankful it's not you. But actually, when we say, I'm so thankful it's not you, I mean, it sounds like we're saying, well, I'm thankful it's someone else, someone I don't know. So it matters less, you know. But that's how we are, you know. And again, it doesn't make you like a bad person, an evil person. This is just calling attention to how we are autopilot, thinking only of ourselves and those that we have labeled as mine. That we are so autopilot in doing that. So what these teachings are aiming to do is to say, time out. Can you see what's going on? Ah, yes, I can. Then even in your efforts, even if you're not therefore doing the opposite, which is prioritizing others, the next line, practice the exchange of self and other, even if you're not doing that yet, just knowing, just paying attention to how autopilot we are in self-cherishing is good, is very good reality check, is very good restraint already. Means we're making, you know, real good improvements when we become alert to that fact. Oh, see how easily I just, you know, fall back on automatic, autopilot. Me first, me first, mine first, my people first, my country first. That this is, that comes out, right? Without us even thinking that way. So these teachings is going against the grain in this sense, or going against the selfish grain, going against the self-cherishing grain, swimming upstream, against the stream, as they say. So this two-step, first you equalize self and other, so that we say, you know, like we're in this together and truly, and so we are equal. But then the next step is the other is more important than me. And what is who is this other? This other is infinity minus one. But every one of us go about living our lives where one is more important than infinity minus one. And not only that, right? I mean, quite naturally, we're like, oh, luckily no humans died in this tragedy. Yeah, because we're human-centered, you know? I mean, there are some people among us, I know some of them, who say, I'm not human-centered, you know? But other, you know, but normally, you know, we're very human-centered. But then, if again, if you lean in there and take a look, you can also see what kind of inconsistency we are engaged in when we are so human-centered. They say, right? What was it? If you add the body mass of all the insects that exist in the world, it exceeds the body mass of all the humans that exist in this world. And you know how tiny insects are compared to humans? So how many more insects there are that exist in the world? Do we think of their welfare for the most part? No. We think of what the exterminator can do, right? Again, I'm not saying here, right? Let's prioritize insects because there's more of them than us. This is just a thought exercise to, again, help us to pause and perhaps pause and exercise restraint. Exercise restraint. Restraint what? Restraining ourselves from being completely dragged around by the negative emotions, from being completely controlled by our wants and likes and dislikes, and without even a moment of examining. So these teachings are meant to help us pause. Just pause and then attend to it, to be attentive. This morning at our practice, our Sunday morning practice at the center, I said that now these days I like the word attentiveness more than mindfulness. Even the word mindfulness has become kind of sometimes, a little bit narcissistic. Attentiveness is a relational quality. We're being attentive to an other. That other may be a person, maybe a pet, but it's even a ball, an inanimate object, or a situation, or a condition. But it's relational, right? And that is the original meaning of what we now call mindfulness. Buddha taught us to be attentive, cultivating attentiveness. And so it's a relational quality. And that lies at the root of bodhisattva practice. It's not so much even about, self-sacrificing, altruism. It's about recognizing the fundamental kind of relational quality of our very existence. And so, in other contexts, this is called dependent arising, interdependence. Especially in the teachings of the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, he emphasized a lot about that aspect of the relational quality of existence, interdependence. So this is verse 16. Okay, now, questions, comments?
One comment or one question I have is, so my understanding that is that like this sort of radical altruism that we associate with the Bodhisattva
Right.
is also a product just of seeing, like when you develop prajna and like this penetrative insight into the way things are, and you see the interdependence, you practice this sort of altruism, but not even necessarily altruism, because you see that you see there's no self boundary between living beings. But my understanding also is that like many beings undertake the bodhisattva vow with a fundamentally altruistic aspiration. So when you say, I guess I'm trying to get clear on, like, it appears to me at once that the sort of generosity that we associate with the bodhisattva is spontaneous upon attaining deeper levels of insight into dependent origination, but also,
We can cultivate,
but it's also, right?
It's what?
It's also intentional, like it's aspirational. Like,
Oh, yes. That's how we cultivate it.
because like for me, when I think about the bodhisattva vow, what's most appealing about it to me is like it's this undertaking to bring all beings toward this sort of liberative and generous awareness or state of being. Does that make sense?
Yes, and then there are things that we we work on, to get there.
Mhm.
I mean, the vision, I always joke about how, oh yeah, the vision, instantly you think of that, and then your personal theme song comes on, they're very inspiring. But then often where we fail is like, the inconvenience that turn up in front of me. In this person wanting time, and I'm like, it's inconvenient right now. Then Bodhisattva vow gone.
Right.
So this morning also I shared, uh, um, this morning I also shared, um, that I saw this bumper sticker. It says, do small things with great love. I said, well, love is a dangerous word, so I'm going to change that to attentiveness. So this Bodhisattva vow, the language is really grand, really big, and necessarily so, because it's encouraging us to cultivate this big mind, this big heart. But then it has to start in very simple, very direct right now, and begins by first seeing how much of self-cherishing is autopilot in us. Then practicing restraint there, the next time you see this going on, not even because you want to be a better person, it's not about that. It's just saying, okay, do I have enough control right now to say, this second scoop of ice cream, I'm going to restrain. I'm going to practice restraint. Or this something, that I intended to eat myself, but I'm going to give to someone. And then when it becomes habitualized, then quite magically, big things, great things you may be doing, even without realizing. But we start from, or on a day-to-day basis, not just about starting, on a day-to-day basis, how we train, how we practice, how we turn intention into attention and attention into action, right? Intention drives attention. Attention leads to action. These teachings on karma that I did a while back, one of the main points, intentions. So setting intention. And then when we set the skillful intention, our attention goes there. And then with attention, we translate into action. Then from action comes results. And results reinforce intention. This loop can either go in a, happiness producing loop, or it can go in a suffering producing loop. But it's the same mechanism.
Say, Dr. Lye, that as soon as I decide I'm going to be generous, I am confronted with my selfishness. It's like a really great way to find out, how actually selfish I am. Decide I'm not going to be selfish. So it speaks to me then the question is, what do you do at that moment when you're like, because I'm doing the bodhicitta part of Mindra right now. Every day I'm spending all this time trying to do that, and get out of practice and I'm a butthead. It's like the worst, but so it is kind of like jumping into the muck and fire, really directly. But I guess the question is then you just have to go in and be kind to yourself. At that point, be like soft about it and.
Mm-hmm. Can you repeat the last part? I'm outside and
Just saying, when you, like, if you provoke when I'm practiced and then my practice provokes this awareness of ego and selfishness,
yes,
then moment, the way that you're saying, these are opportunities to train,
mm-hmm.
okay? And I think what you're saying, how you train at that moment
Yes,
is what exactly? It's to be kind to yourself, it's actually to be forgiving and generous and
yes,
sweet.
yes.
So,
Yeah, as when that kindness to self is parked in the context of bodhicitta,
yeah,
then it's skillful.
yeah.
When the kind to yourself is not parked in bodhicitta, it could go either way. Sometimes helpful, sometimes harmful.
Want to do at that moment is be mad at yourself or compound the
Mhm.
problem by it, being tough and hard.
Yes. Mhm. I'm not in my usual spot. I'm in the veranda of my neighbor's house because my neighbors have gone to Taiwan and they have a dog that needs company.
We notice the bird sounds, it's very
Oh,
nice.
yeah. Lots of birds in our neighborhood. I hear way more birds chirping away here than in Costa Rica jungle walk. I said all the birds have moved to the suburbs, like the humans.
It's where the bird feeders are, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, because there's plenty food in the suburbs, you know. It's funny when I went to Costa Rica, I went on all these jungle walks, you know. Like after hours, you know, you see 3 monkeys, and then you go like back into the neighborhoods, you know, there's a whole bunch of monkeys. You figure out where food is, you know. So here.
Yes, the name of the game.
Doctor, would you speak to, I have this issue or problem repeatedly, and I'm sure you've addressed it before. But the beginning of this chapter, it seems like to me, or at least I'm experiencing it as fear tactics to get the motivation going, which for me brings up, I think, afflictive emotions.
Say that again, last part. It brings what?
It looks like afflictive emotions.
What looks
Fear.
like?
Well, the the early verses seem like it's threatening and ominous, like, oh, if you don't do this.
Okay, is it true or not true? Let's start there.
What?
What he said, the first few verses, true or not true?
Well, that's my experience of it is.
No. What he is talking about, true or not true? Death will come. When it comes, you have no idea.
What questioning is the way of creating the motivation. The aspiration doesn't seem joyful. Or it actually has the
Yes.
opposite.
Before we talk about the effect, right? Let's start with anything he said there that is not true?
No.
No. Okay, good. Then we should be brave enough to hear these words. So how we react to those words tells us more about where we are. Then we can work on it. You know?
How do you be brave enough to hear these words and not then be motivated by something that seems backwards to avoid?
If we cannot first see how real death is, you know, then we are just practicing avoidance. That has to come face to face. Yes, I get what you're saying, but I'm not willing to say, oh, okay, therefore, just think about happy thoughts.
Well, I was kind of hoping you could reframe it and suggest that it was cultural misunderstanding.
Maybe, but everybody dies, everybody dies, even Jesus Christ died, and then later some people said, he beat death, but basically everybody dies. Yeah. And we're not stopping there. We're continuing on. So he sets up a stage. So patience. You see now, first, he brings out, can you see, you're going to die. I remember this story many years ago. Someone, see, dog. uh, Many years ago, somebody recounted this this exchange. One Buddhist teacher who has been active in the West was translating for a student who was meeting the great Dugyo Khyentse Rinpoche, one of the greatest Tibetan Buddhist masters of our times. And so this student was recently diagnosed with terminal cancer. So went to see Dugyo Khyentse Rinpoche, and and then this teacher was Tibetan teacher who's been working in the West, teaching in the West, was the translator, and so translated. And the first thing Dugyo Khyentse Rinpoche said to the student, and the student said, please help me, probably a little bit of also, maybe you have practices that can help me beat, cancer. And the Dugyo Khyentse Rinpoche, first thing apparently he said was like, so first thing to know, he says, you will die. And so the translator teacher said, I don't know how, like, do I translate that? Do I sugarcoat it, And he said, but I trust my teacher, so I exactly translated that, First of all, you need to see this. You will die. So of course, when he translated, the woman, the student is like really like, Then next thing, Khyentse Rinpoche said is, and I will die. Then he pointed to the translator, and he will die. And as to who goes first, what order we are going, no one really knows. So the Buddhist tradition is brutally honest with this point. There's no way to kind of skirt around. And if right now, hearing that I don't like, then it's like, okay, that's where the work is. That's where the work is. And to hear that again and again and again. And then, given that truth, what can I do? And what you can do is not, it's not the promise of eternal life. The promise of beating death. The promise of having certainty when you're going to die. No. What you can do is something else. To achieve deathlessness, in quotes, in the midst of birth and death. And then when you start getting that, that's when energy rises. Yes. No problem. That's real energy. That's real joy. You'll tend towards virtue. You'll tend towards happiness. Happiness is not the absence of suffering. Happiness is in the midst of suffering. The heart doesn't move. The heart doesn't shake. in the midst of birth and death. It doesn't shake, it doesn't move. Shantideva is constantly, and you don't want to get stuck, Well, but over here it says this. He's constantly coming at it on this direction, this direction, this direction, this direction, this direction. So on the practical level, if right now those few lines, very disturbing, leave them alone. But ultimately, you cannot leave them alone. Okay? Temporarily, you can leave them alone. You're like, okay, cannot hear that in a helpful way right now. Okay, bracket that aside, move on. But know that at some point, need to come back to that. Cheryl talked about which part of preliminary practices she's doing. So the very beginning of preliminary practice is the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. And constantly needing to reinforce oneself with that. To keep reminding oneself of that. That becomes like the impetus, Milarepa said, because I feared death, so I ran into the mountains, and there I found deathlessness. Then many years later, all his disciples attended his funeral. So anyway, I have to run.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So next weekend, we are hosting a visiting teacher. So I will not be able to meet with you guys. And then after that, I go to Peru. And so realistically, I think next time I see you all, whether in person or on Zoom, it's going to be at EBS. So now you're on your own for a while. Yay!
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lye.
At least be easier to stay awake for this hour and a half when I'm not around. You're not just like listening to me, blah, 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 all the way. All of you will be more awake, so that's the positive side.
We like listening to you.
Oh.
Yeah, we get quite a lot out of it.
Trouble is sometimes I also like listening to myself, and so that's so anyway. Okay, bye-bye. I will see all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, very good. Thanks, guys.